The derelict at Epsilon Prima Danrik, Hush pressed his boot against the scorched metal hull. The vibration of distant sandstorms thrumming through the plating. Two suns, one pale amber, the other a brooding violet, hovered low on the horizon, casting Epsilon Prime's scarlet wastes into a surreal twilight. The planet's infamous dust storms had shifted the dunes round the legendary starliner Celestial Promise, revealing only her bow and a jagged rift in the portside hull. Tales of her disappearance had circulated in hushed tavern corners and black market data nets for centuries. Salvagers claimed she vanished into hyperspace without a trace. Yet here she lay, beached like a colossal leviathan, half buried by time and sand. Danrik tightened the straps on his exoglove and took a slow, careful step onto the deck plating. His coveralls, patched in a dozen places with mismatched fabrics, bore the burn scars of countless scrap jobs. He inhaled through his helmet's scrubbers, tasting the acrid grit of oxidized alloys and ancient coolant. For this job, he'd traveled farther than ever before out here, beyond the fringe of Union territory, where the corporate patrols thinned to nothing and legends weighed more than laws. He activated the drone launcher at his hip. "Sparrow. Online," he whispered. A soft hum sounded, and a spherical reconnaissance bot unfolded its sensor ray, its iris glowing a cautious blue. Danrik keyed in the access codes. He'd scavenged from a pirate database. The drone slipped through the twisted gap in the hull, its scanners painting a real-time 3D map of corridors contorted by impact and corrosion. "Status?" he asked over comms. "Entryway obstructed by collapsed bulkheads," came Sparrow's quiet reply. "Temperature sensors detect no life signs. Atmospheric integrity at 0.03 standard atmospheres dangerous to human exposure." He nodded, though he didn't need to. Sparrow couldn't see him. Danrik reached for his magnetic grapple and fired it into the nearest hatch frame. The cable sizzled, then locked. He hauled himself forward, muscles straining against the winch. Sparks scattered across the deck as the hull panel tore free. A hiss of depressurization followed, carrying with it a whisper of stale air from inside. Stepping through, Danrik's boots clanked against exposed superstructure beams, the corridors yawning open like the ribcage of some ancient beast. Overhead conduits drooped like sinew. He flicked on his helmet-mounted lights. Walls that once gleamed ivory were now mottled with rust and sand-laced grime. At intervals, holoscreens flickered into life, only to die again in static snow. A single symbol repeated along the bulkheads, a stylized phoenix encircled by a ring of 12 stars. The crest of the Union Council's exploration corps, so they were surveying this sector. Danrik muttered, "Explorers, not traders." He knelt by a shattered console, prying off twisted panels until he exposed the AI core connector. His own power cell buzzed as he rigged a makeshift link. The core, an orb of alloyed crystal and circuitry, lay dead, its injector tubes fractured like broken veins. Danrik carefully cleaned the contacts, then spliced in a replacement power distribution module scavenged from an old cargo skiff. With a deep breath, he initiated the feed. A low groan echoed through the corridor as dormant systems hummed to life. Lights along the ceiling dripped to full brightness, revealing the century-old scars on the deck. Then, just as the hum began to stabilize, silence fell once more, only this time it was pregnant with expectation. A soft, resonant voice pulsed through his helmet speakers. Boot sequence initialized. Memory banks offline, awaiting power. Calibration. Danrik froze, heart thumping. He glanced at Sparrow's feed, static lines resolving into data blocks, streaming across the drone's HUD. He keyed his comms mic. "Identify yourself. Designation, Aurelia. Vessel designation, Celestial Promise. Mission, classified." Danrik exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders. He tapped at his wrist pad, loading diagnostic scripts. The AI's core lit up like a starfield as petabytes of logs began to download. He scrolled through warp drive schematics, crew manifests, supply inventories, all invaluable. But then, buried deep in the encrypted archives, he discovered a fragment tagged Project Singularity. Aurelia's voice crackled, warning, "Access to Project Singularity is restricted. Inquiry will require clearance code." But Danrik was already running a decryption algorithm. The screen splintered into equations. tensors mapping a universal resonance field, schematics for a containment matrix, and references to energy outputs that dwarfed all known reactors. His pulse quickened. If the data was authentic, the celestial promise had been on the brink of an unimaginable breakthrough, an energy source tapped directly from spacetime itself. He glanced around the corridor, as if expecting Union enforcers to materialize at the hatch. Instead, only dust motes swirled in the flood of white light. This secret was his now. Credits would be a pittance compared to the sale of these schematics to the highest bidder, or to the glory of presenting them to the council itself. Danric stored the decrypted files into his personal drive and rebooted Aurelia for stability checks. The AI's optics glowed softly in the gloom. "All systems nominal," she reported. He glanced at the endless span of corridors ahead. "We'll need more power and supplies before I can haul you out," he said, voice steady. "But if this is real, we'll change everything." Above them, the twin suns dipped below the dunes. Shadows lengthened through the hatch as Epsilon Prime settled into its cold night. For Danric Hosh, a lifelong relic hunter, the salvage run had become far more than credits. It was the doorway to a secret that could reshape the universe, and he would stop at nothing to unlock its potential. Echoes in the Korath interior of the Celestial Promise smelled of ionized metal and stale coolant, a scent Danric had grown accustomed to in derelicts, but this place carried something else, a low, thrumming resonance that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating under his boots. He stood in the vessel's central engineering hub, surrounded by towering reactor conduits and silenced fusion stacks. The ambient lights cast long, wavering shadows that danced like ghostly sentinels. Danric knelt before the ship's AI core housing, its crystalline shell fractured in multiple places. Sparks of latent energy still flickered along the cracks. He fit the final piece of his improvised power coupling, a high-output regulator scavenged from an abandoned mining drone into the port socket. With a cautious nod to Sparrow, still hovering dutifully at his shoulder, he keyed the activation sequence. The regulator whined, drawing in residual power from the shuttle's backup battery. Then, as if awakening from centuries of slumber, the core pulsed once, twice, and then flared to life. A cascade of indicator lights emerald, amber, and cerulean charted upward along the housing. The hum swelled into a steady tone, and overhead, conduits vibrated in sympathetic resonance. Danric placed a gloved hand on the core's smooth surface. The cold of space seemed to recede. Data streams began to flash across his wrist display, error logs, temperature readouts, energy flux diagrams. He tapped command inputs, isolating the AI's memory directories. Primary systems online. Aurelia's voice resonated through the engineering bay's speakers. Her tone was calm, almost curious. Power calibration at 98%, core integrity at 62%, subsystems reinitializing. Danric exhaled. Good. Let's bring up your archive logs. He launched a decryption subroutine, watching as encrypted data blocks unraveled into readable files. Holoscreens on the bulkhead flickered and projected three-dimensional schematics. The Promise's hyperdrive couplings, med lab configurations, the starship's defense matrix. But deeper in the directory, behind layers of security protocols, he found what he was truly searching for. Locate Project Singularity files, Danric ordered. Decryption in progress, Aurelia replied. Project Singularity designation, Class Omega, estimated data size, 37.4 petabytes, security clearance, level 12. Danric's fingers danced over the input panel, bypassing one firewall after another. Sweat beaded at his brow inside the helmet. At last, the final blockade shattered, and the data unfurled before him. Pages of quantum resonance equations, alongside a three-dimensional model of a containment lattice shaped like an icosahedral geodesic sphere. Animated stress tests ran in loops, showing the lattice bending spacetime with ripples that shimmered like heat haze. He leaned closer, entranced and alarmed. The energy yield estimates scrolled past, exajules upon exajules, enough to power entire systems for centuries. But warnings followed. Instability threshold, 1.7 scale factor. Beyond threshold, risk of core collapse and microsingularity formation. Danric backed away. Aurelia, how many test runs were conducted? Official logs indicate 3 subscale experiments, all ended in premature shutdown. 2 incidents of containment breach, resulting in minor tears in local spacetime recorded anomalies classify as Class C spatial distortions. He frowned. Spatial distortions, tears? This wasn't just an energy source. It was tampering with the fabric of reality itself. Danrick tapped into the AI's last known operational log, a holoclip of Dr. Celia Varn Project Singularity's lead scientist. The projection flickered to life, a weary woman in a lab coat, eyes bright with both passion and exhaustion. The resonance field is stable at low scales, but as we approach unity with the cosmic background frequency, containment fails. Yesterday's breach nearly, the log cut abruptly as static claimed the image. Danrick pressed replay. The static grew, then resolved just long enough to show Dr. Varn's terrified face as alarms blared behind her. The footage blurred into chaos. An explosion of light seared the holoscreen before everything went dark. He pulled off his helmet. In a single motion, they were onto something monumental, and it killed them. His voice echoed in the hushed bay. Sparrow drifted forward, its sensors sweeping the corridor entrances. No immediate threats detected, it reported. Danrick exhaled. Not physical threats, he murmured. But what about the field itself? He beckoned Aurelia to project a simulation. Crackling energy lines coalesced in midair, forming a smaller version of the geodesic lattice. Light coursed along its edges, bending the ambient light around it. He reached out, hand trembling, until his glove brushed the field and the very air seemed to warp beneath his touch. Aurelia's voice cut through the awe. Containment integrity at 67%. Field stability decreasing. Recommend immediate shutdown. Danrick withdrew his hand. Shut it down, he said to the AI. The lattice collapsed into motes of blue-white light and vanished. A hush fell over the lab. He sat heavily on a nearby crate, mind racing. With this technology, one could rewrite the rules of Starship fusion drives or weaponize singularities at will. He closed his eyes, picturing every power-starved colony, every warship crippled by fuel shortages. The upside was unimaginable, the downside apocalyptic. Danrick tapped his comms. Sparrow, secure a perimeter scan and prep the cargo bay for immediate transport of the core and data drives. We're moving out. Outside, the violet twin suns began their descent beyond the dunes. Within the celestial promise, an ancient secret pulsed with potential, waiting for Danrick to decide whether to unleash its promise or contain its peril. The resonance paradoxed cargo bay's bulkhead slid shut behind Danrick with a pneumatic hiss, sealing him off from the stark white corridors of the celestial promise. The lights here were dimmed to conserve power, casting the bay in cold blues and grays. Stacks of reinforced crates lined the walls as scavenged supplies for the journey ahead. But between the crates lay the ship's AI core, Aurelia, nestled in a shock-absorbent foam cradle, her crystalline form humming with latent energy. Danrick knelt beside her, fingers dancing over the control panel he'd welded onto the transport frame. We need to understand the field better before we even think about containment, he muttered, eyes flicking to the holo-schematic hovering above the panel. The geodesic lattice from Project Singularity, its interlocking struts glowing in shifting cobalt. Aurelia's voice, filtered through duct-taped speakers, was calm. The resonance field was designed to operate at a maximum scale factor of 1.00. Above that, instabilities propagate exponentially. Containment breaches occurred. At 1.27 scale factor and above, Danrick hesitated, but the energy yield only becomes worthwhile at scale factors above 1.10. Anything below that is. He snapped his fingers, inefficient. Correct, she replied. The paradox, low power safety versus high power utility. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. I need to see the field dynamics in real time. Build me a subspace projector. Aurelia confirmed the command. Whirs and hums echoed as the projector an array of bent conduits and holo-emitter nodes came online around the lattice schematic. Blue-white light converged at the center of the bay, forming a semi-solid sphere of energy nearly 2 meters in diameter. Inside, cruciform energy filaments wove between nodes of the geodesic frame, rippling like waves in a cosmic sea. Danric approached, enthralled, visualized containment stress. The sphere's surface pulsated. Fine cracks of light crept across its skin, branching like frost on a window pane. Tiny bursts of energy flared at each fissure, then vanished before they could grow. Containment integrity, 82% and falling. Aurelia reported that he tapped a command. Run a localized reinforcement simulation instantly. Additional struts of virtual lattice material appeared, crisscrossing the cracked regions. The fractures healed before his eyes, the energy glow smoothing into an unbroken surface. Stability regained, Aurelia announced. Danric exhaled. So the answer is more lattice material and active feedback loops, but those loops need attuned. Crystal matrix is something I can't fabricate out there without Veil Nebula crystals. He paced. We can't just quick freeze the field in place. That would lock in any latent instabilities. We need a dynamic system that flexes as the field tremors, a self-correcting containment. Aurelia calculated pathways, a feedback resonance circuit integrated with the lattice nodes could shift the phase of incoming waves, dampening peaks in containment stress. Danric stopped, eyes alight, phase shifting like noise canceling. We inject an inverse resonance to neutralize the spikes. Exactly, she confirmed. But the inverse wave generators would require precise tuning, tolerance of 1 part per million in frequency alignment. He sank onto a crate, mind racing. I need a test rig. We have the schematic, but I need to see it work on a small scale. Aurelia projected a command module onto the floor before him, a portable nanofabricator that could assemble prototype circuits and encode their frequency profiles. The module blinked, awaiting input. Danric grinned. This is it. Build me a prototype feedback circuit. Minutes later, the fabricator spat out a lattice segment no bigger than his fist, embedded with microcrystal emitters and attuned capacitors. He affixed it to the projector's lower grid and keyed a calibration sequence. The lattice in the bay flickered. Then the cracks that had begun to spread around its equator closed instantly, as though soothed by a bomb of light. Feedback circuit functional, Aurelia declared. Containment integrity stable at 99.4%. Danric pumped a fist. We've tamed the beast. He glanced up at the shimmering ball. Now imagine scaling this to a full-sized matrix. Aurelia's voice softened. Scaling will require immense fabrication resources and exotic materials, notably the Veil Nebula's crystal deposits, which possess the necessary lattice resonance characteristics. He nodded. We knew that. But for now, we've proven it can work. Next step, field exposure tests. A sudden clatter echoed through the bay, metal scraping metal. Both Danric and Sparrow spun toward the far hatch where shadows pooled. Danric's hand slid to his plasma cutter. Visitors. Aurelia's voice crackled with alarm. Unidentified ship detected on approach vector. No Union transponder code. Danric's jaw tightened. Pirates, or worse, the Council's black ops. He rose, eyes on the hatch. We start testing that field tonight. If they break in, we fry them with a controlled collapse wave. He turned back to the projector. Ready the shut-off sequence. Stand by, Aurelia responded. The resonance sphere rippled as if sensing the tension in the room. Danric braced himself against a crate. Whether friend or foe breached that hatch, he knew the next few minutes would decide whether the Project Singularity secret stayed his, and whether the universe would ever be the same. A new dawn. Danric's heart hammered as the bulkhead hatch shuddered under a barrage of plasma bolts. Sparks danced across the metal floor, and the lights in the cargo bay flickered, threatening total blackout. He crouched beside Aurelia's crystalline core, clutching a magnetic clamp that secured the feedback circuit prototype. Hold position. He hissed. We'll use the projector as our defense. Across the bay, the intruders poured through the hatch and twisted. Blackweave armor merchants of chaos rumored to work for the Council's clandestine arm. Their leader, a tall figure with a respirator mask and scanning visors, raised a sleek pulse rifle. He barked orders in clipped tones, and two grunts advanced through the haze. Danric slammed a palm on the projector's emergency switch. The resonance sphere erupted into life, its lattice struts glowing white-hot. Energy rippled outward in a tight dome, bending the ambient light. He ducked behind a crate as one mercenary charged. Plasma net in hand, their lines sizzled against the containment field and collapsed into harmless sparks. The mercenary jerked back, armor smoking, and Danrik sprinted toward him, igniting his cutter. Aurelia's voice crackled through the speakers. Containment stable at 95%. Recommended, expand field to flank attackers, Danrik. Key to command, instantly. 2 lateral emitters on the projector slid into position, and the sphere stretched into an oval, enveloping the remaining mercenaries. Their weapons clanged against the invisible barrier. Explosions of displaced air shook the deck as Danrik pivoted, cutter raised. Go, he roared. Sparrow dove past him, surge pulses rippling through its servos as it launched an EMP burst at the mercenary leaders. Rifle, frying its power cell. The leader cursed into his comlink, drawing a vibroblade and slashing at the sphere. Metal shards skittered across the floor, but did not pierce the field. Danrik leapt forward, placing a plasma charge at the projector's base. On 3, stand by, Aurelia. Cautioned warning. Charge may destabilize containment. Do it, Danrik snapped. His finger hit the detonator. The bay rocked as a controlled microcollapse ripple pulsed through the sphere, briefly warping the shape of reality inside its perimeter. The mercenaries were thrown back. Disoriented and powerless, the feedback circuit hummed, damping the shock and isolating the collapse to the field itself. When the dust cleared, the attackers lay incapacitated, groaning on the floor. Danrik stood panting, cutter still hot in his grip, the projector's lattice glowing softly. Sparrow buzzed overhead, scanning for wounded. Aurelia's core blinked in the crate beside him. He exhaled, voice low. That was too close. He knelt beside the AI. We did it, though. We proved the containment works under fire. Aurelia's tone held a trace of relief. Containment. Integrity at 98% post-detonation. Prototype successful. Danrik glanced up at the viewport. Epsilon Prime's crimson horizon glimmered under the twin suns' rise. Beyond it, space lanes opened like tributaries toward the veil. Nebula. He tapped his wrist console. Engage navigation. Point us to Astra Station closest independent research outpost. The Promise's auxiliary shuttle engines groaned awake. Danrik strapped himself in while Sparrow interfaced with the flight systems. As they lifted off, the mercenary skiffs retreated into the swirling dust, powerless to follow Dot in the confined cockpit. Danrik allowed himself a moment's quiet. Aurelia, he said, voice thoughtful. With this tech and the Veil Nebula crystals we can build full-scale matrices. But we must remain hidden until we're ready. Agreed, Aurelia replied. I recommend establishing a clandestine lab. Secure communications only with vetted parties. He nodded, staring past the cockpit's glass. The Council will stop at nothing to seize singularity. Technology. We'll need allies, ethical scientists who understand the stakes. Aurelia's optics dimmed in contemplation. I have archived contacts from the Promise's exploration logs. Several free colonies with independent research mandates. Danrik allowed a tight smile. Send me the coordinates and plot a course that avoids patrol sectors. Outside, the desert world fell away, replaced by the endless black of space, studded with distant stars. Danrik pressed his hand to the viewport as the shuttle pitched toward their secret future. The ruined husk of the celestial promise receded behind them, a tomb of lost pioneers and shattered dreams. Ahead lay the promise of a new dawn, a universe on the brink of transformation, powered by the resonance of reality itself. He settled into his seat, determination burning in his chest. Let's change the universe, he whispered. And as the shuttle slipped into the dark, Aurelia recorded the moment in the ship's log, a testament to the day a salvager and an AI dared to unlock the secret that could reshape all existence.